Welcome to UpFront. My first guest is James Zaccaria. He's a artist who grew up in East Boston, and we're going to learn about his art and what influenced him. And we're going to talk about an award that he's going to receive in Los Angeles next month, April 2022. And we're going to really get into some of his East Boston history, and we're going to talk about certain items like designing book covers and doing original art. So first of all, welcome, Jim, to UpFront.
Thank you, Frank.
Let's talk about East Boston, because eastboston.com is really about the neighborhood that we both know and love. Where did you grow up, and what were some of your early experiences?
I loved growing up in East Boston. The family and the friends I had, the people, I thought, I loved it. And it took many years for me to actually move out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did love it. I lived in many places in East Boston. Come to mind, Putnam Street, Trenton Street, Lexington Street, Saratoga Street twice, Brandywine Village. Yeah, I lived all over.
Yeah, you moved around quite a bit.
I did, yeah.
When did you wind up moving out?
It started because I moved out to Beachwine.
Okay.
And the way that happened was I got together with another artist and a photographer, and we got the apartment mainly for studio space. It was an apartment with 2 floors. And eventually I moved in there. I forget, maybe I lived there maybe 5 years, and then moved back to East Boston.
Yeah. Where did you go to school?
For art or in East Boston?
Let's start at high school.
East Boston High, of course. I went there. Went to the Kennedy School, the Barnes School. Mainly all the schools in East Boston is where I went.
Yeah, the only one that's inactive that you mentioned is the Barnes School, which is now senior housing.
Right, my mother was there.
Yeah,
I lived in there, so it was.
Yeah, so you're familiar.
Going in there.
Yeah, so you've seen it in all its forms. Where did you go to? Did you go to college or art school?
I went to art school.
Where?
I'm sort of like a Butera School of Art, and they are on Beacon Street in Boston, right across from Emerson.
Okay. Does it still exist?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were really known as a sign painting school. I think that's how they started, maybe. And but they taught commercial art there. And that's where I went and graduated from. But I've also taken courses at the museum school, the Museum of Fine Art School, Mass College of Art. I continue education. I mean, it's not something you do once, and especially
that is very much true, particularly in this technological age.
Right.
So what were some of your why did you decide to become an artist, commercial artist or visual artist, or what inspired you early on?
I was just drawn to it. I mean, it's one of the things usually all kids learn how to draw, and then they break off from that and to study for real jobs. It never left me. And that I was sort of a late bloomer too. I worked for a long time, various crappy jobs, until I decided I was going to go to art school. And when I went to art school, and while I was in art school, I actually started working for Galileo and Galaxy magazines. They were in the Avenue Victor Hugo bookstore up
Oh, I
on,
remember. Yeah, on Newberry Street.
right, and they were upstairs. The magazines were produced upstairs. It was Galileo magazine and the Science Fiction Times. But then they also acquired Galaxy
Uh-huh.
magazine. So yeah, that, so I was in my element. That's where I wanted to be, meeting the artists and some of the authors. Frederick Pohl came by one day. Yeah, so yeah,
It's sad to see those institutions like the Victor Hugo just disappear. It's really, really sad. I can't even convey to my kids what it was like to stroll up and down Newberry Street, where you're not even able to. I wasn't able to afford anything on Newberry Street, but I was able to go into that bookstore and just spend a great afternoon browsing. That's a lost art.
yes, it is.
It really is. So what were your influences really in terms of everyone, writers, musicians, artists, they all are inspired by somebody that they would like to model their own work. Who inspired you?
Roger Dean.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Album cover design in general and Roger Dean. In fact, when I went to art school, I thought that's what I was going for, to be album cover designer.
Yeah.
And then, everything became CDs. I said, well, I'm not as interested as that, but, yeah, I'll do that too. But while I was in art school, though, I really started getting an appreciation for book cover design too.
Yeah.
I always thought I would work in book covers. Mainly, I thought I'll be doing illustrations, but I ended up being the book cover designer.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a big Yes fan. I always was enthralled by Roger Dean's art. It's kind of quasi psychedelic, really out there, but it had a tinge of being really sci-fi and futuristic. And what's amazing about it is the band kept going back to him. Even individual solo, when members of Yes went solo, they took Roger Dean along to do their cover art. I found that very, a great example of being faithful.
Right. I know Steve Howe in particular. He said, that Roger Dean was his guy. I mean, he would have them, if it was up to him, he would have them do every album cover. They broke off a little bit. They, going for the one, they used Hypnosis.
Uh-huh.
Which, they were a great album design packagers, studio. They did a lot of great stuff.
And just describe them for our audience briefly. Which the group was? What did they do? What were they known for?
Hypnosis did work for everybody. Peter Gabriel, 10cc, Led Zeppelin. I mean, they did work for everybody. It was mainly photograph-based work, but they would do, these fantastic photo shoots. I have one here in my office that they did for the Nice. With big giant red balls are in the desert, and they went out to a desert and had these big giant red balls and photographed them.
Yeah, it's. I remember when I was in college, I wrote there was an exhibit around town. I forget where it was, but it was all about album covers and how important they were. And you're right. You touched upon this. It's really a lost art. It's diminished physically, literally. It's diminished because of the CD. But I'm wondering, are there opportunities for you now that since everything is on the web? I mean, as an artist, that your canvas has kind of gone to another dimension.
Right. There still is in book cover design. I mean, 20 years ago, people were saying that ebooks were going to take over, and they never did.
Yeah.
Partly, I think it might be the technology. You had to buy a device to actually, read books on them.
Yeah.
And maybe had to upgrade that device. Who knows? I mean, I never bought one. So no, I book cover design, there's still opportunity. I do work for independent authors. I my work that I do, my artwork that I do that's personal, I usually sell those as prints. So I go to conventions and what they call fan cons or popular culture cons now. Like I did the Boston Comic Con, which is
Oh,
now called Boston, Fan Boston, that Fan Expo Boston. That's what it is. This, yeah. So I go around doing those.
uh-huh.
On the Gen Con in Indianapolis, which is mainly a game-based convention. So a lot of gaming, they use a lot of artists, and that is a big, large opportunity, large field.
Right, right. I'm totally ignorant of the gaming community. In
Uh-huh.
fact, I teach at a school that has a prominent esports program, and the kids often ask to be excused to go to these esport competitions, and apparently I learned that there's a lot of money involved with esports, and it just shows my age, really, that I'm so out of
Well,
touch, really.
the gaming I'm talking about is mainly science fiction and fantasy based.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's either video games or that type of thing. But largely it's board games.
yeah,
Magic the Gathering is a big one. Wizards of the Coast, they are probably the biggest outfit that puts those things out, and everybody wants to work for them.
yeah. Well, you could tell I'm an economist because I like to talk about the business of art from time to time. But let's focus a little bit on your own art. I have several pieces that I'm about to show. So let's see if I can meet the technological challenge and share my screen. And we could talk about your art here. So this one seems to be my favorite. It's what you call the listener. Is that correct?
The listening tower.
Okay. And what influenced you here? What are you trying to convey?
Okay. Well, how this started was I was doing a book cover design for a musicologist. And in the process of designing it, I did literally on a Post-it, I did this, this little, thumbnail sketch on this idea. The idea is, those old listening horns that you put up
Yeah.
to your ear, and it's like a giant, playing a little bit of surrealism here is a giant listening horn.
Yeah.
The idea behind it is to listen to world music.
Wow.
And so what happened was, I explained to the author how I wanted it to approach it, how I want to look realistic.
So
And
is this for a book or a
this was for a
video?
book. This was
Okay.
for a book called The Listening Book. And what ended up happening is he said, no, I love the sketch. Just colorize the sketch. And so that's what I did, and that's what ended up on the book cover.
Yeah.
But I felt so strongly about the idea.
Yeah.
I had to go ahead and paint it for myself.
Yeah.
And I entered it in the local science fiction convention, Boscone. And the art show people, they loved it. They wrote me a letter late afterwards. And I got the smallest space possible to put up maybe 4 illustrations that I did. And they loved it. They said, you should keep on, doing this, and you should get a larger space next year. And
Yeah. What is the scale of a work like this? We're looking at it on video on a computer, but what are the dimensions of a work like this?
Dimensions.
Yeah.
Well, this was done digitally.
Okay.
So I painted this in Photoshop.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember right, it was something like 12 by 12 inches.
Okay.
But I exhibit it large on that. I exhibited about 26 inches square.
Wow.
I actually designed it so that it fit on a CD cover.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so I was
yeah,
thinking about that, and because as I say, I always wanted to do album covers, and yeah, so that's it.
yeah, yeah. So how about this work?
Okay.
This is called,
Rope ladder to the moon,
okay.
which is
And what was the purpose of this? Was just something on your own, or was it commissioned?
no, this was a personal piece. I've always loved the song. It's a song by Jack Bruce of Cream. It was on his first solo album, Songs for a Tailor.
Uh-huh.
And this, Rope Ladder to the Moon, I loved it. I always wanted to express it somehow, but it ended up doing it in sort of a science fiction-y way, making a rope ladder shaped spaceship.
Uh-huh.
It's a love, it's a love song too, and it's a really poetic lyrics to it. And so that's how I approach this.
So it's clear that music is definitely an inspiration for you here.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's where you draw a lot of your work. It's pretty wild. Um, it has that ethereal feel to it. And let's try this one, which is really a little enigmatic. I mean, the reflection it really tells a story. Go ahead.
It is. And in fact, it was for a book cover.
Uh-huh.
This one's for a book cover. The book was called The Changeling of Finis Stewart. It's an old Irish story. No, well, I mean, it's fiction. And when I did it, you really couldn't see the figure mirrored in the water because the size of the book cover. There's a 6x9 book cover, and you really couldn't see. Maybe got partially the towards the end of the robe, but you couldn't see that much of it. So I rebooted it basically to make it as a print to sell at conventions. And I included the figure, which is part of the story. And so, yeah, that's how this ended up.
Really, it's really nice. And here,
Okay, another another song influence this time. There was a song by Red Hot Chili Peppers, and in it is a line that says, "Riding the Paisley Dragon through the Hollywood Hills," which is probably a drug reference, but
yeah.
hit me on Paisley Dragon. Yeah, I will. I don't think I've ever seen that done. And yeah, I got little Paisley eggs there in the nest.
Yeah, you're very fond of this blue tone, aren't you?
I don't know. Am I?
That's what I'm picking up.
Okay.
But it's really nice. I mean, the details are nice and everything, and the wings here. If you look closely at the wings, there's all kinds of nice detail in there. Yeah. So this was for
Again, for a personal piece.
A personal piece. Cool.
That I sell prints of. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about this one? Was this for what was this also personal, or was it commissioned?
No, this is also personal, but it has no music connection at all. I worked for a Buddhist publisher for a while. Did a lot of book covers for them. And started really liking a lot of the art. And so I wanted to do something, sort of like Asian flavored. The dragon itself is sort of, an Asian
right motif. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to work with those, with those motifs, as you say, and this sort of came up with. And I also try to, design something that looks sort of like a gaming card in a way. That sort of magic. You see that magic happening, with the dragon's head coming out of the wall.
Yeah, a little freaky. Let's talk about this one, which is really interesting. I think it's called Is it called Voodoo Child?
Voodoo Child,
Yeah,
the Jimi Hendrix song.
okay.
Yeah, and yeah, so I thought it'd be great to show a voodoo priestess that is pregnant, uh,
Uh-huh,
and Voodoo Child. Just a play on the words. But also he had another song called Belly Button Window. Uh,
uh-huh.
yeah, and in it, he's talking about, yeah, as if he's a child, unborn child.
Uh-huh.
He's talking about looking through his belly button window, and that kind of influenced this as well.
Mhm. The skulls are pretty horrifying, which is what you want. And you got like a crocodile skull, is that right? Or an
Right,
alligator?
right.
And what
Uh,
does that symbolize, do you think?
Nothing in particular. I mean, I was just taking some, things that, that look like they came maybe from the south and were, even the trees in the background had a sort of like, I don't know what you call the trees, but I want it to look very swampy.
Yeah, yeah. And have you shown this work around? Or,
Again, this is a personal piece,
uh-huh,
selling prints. I sold a lot of these prints actually in Atlanta when I did Dragon Con.
uh-huh, yeah. Well, let's see what else we have here. Okay, this one, this is interesting.
Yeah, this is
Insofar as that her eyes seem to be lost.
this one's called The Cyprian Cat.
Mhm.
It's actually a story that I read. It was a book of witchcraft stories
Okay,
written by women. And this one was about a woman who would change into a cat at every night.
uh-huh,
I wanted to express that, with sort of the shadow of trees, on her that look like the stripes of a cat, and the wind blowing that, her hair is starting to take on the shape of a cat's ears.
hmm.
And yeah, her eyes start going to a glowy pale color. Um,
Do you
and
remember the author of this work?
last name is Sayer. I think it's Dorothy Sayer.
Okay, all right. So this is a really futuristic one.
Right.
And what was the idea behind this? And was this for yourself or for a client?
This was again for myself. I
Okay,
really want to do something very science fiction-y, and I was actually thinking about Bowie, um, and his movie, The Man Who Fell to Earth,
okay.
and
Yeah, I remember
that
seeing that a long time ago.
right, and that was sort of like the kernel that this grew from.
Yeah.
Uh, that was a seed that this grew from. Yeah, I just wanted to literally show some kind of like uh, person, science fiction alien or whatever, being transported in some weird way with light, uh,
Mhm.
and a futuristic city.
Yeah. I'd be amiss if I didn't ask you about your technique. What does it involve? Is it like a screening process, or is it something that you just use a lot of
Um,
digital tools?
Mainly digital, but I mean, I'll start with traditional media. I mean, I usually do thumbnails, to get the design down. And usually in pencil, very small, scribbly little things, and it only makes sense to me, nobody else.
Yeah.
And I'll develop it from there. It may still be developing it in pencil, or I may just take it into Photoshop and start, playing with the shapes there. Taking this one, using this one as an example, the buildings in the background, I
Uh-huh.
use a 3D program, 3D software to build those.
Wow.
Just build the shapes, and I never colorize them in 3D or map textures onto them. I just want a grayscale reference for me to paint from.
Uh-huh.
Basically, either I actually incorporate that render right into the piece, or I am just using the render as reference.
Okay.
And the figure was mainly just built by shapes in Photoshop. And sometimes I take a different, I haven't got one way to do anything. I take a different approach on everything.
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, I hope somebody picks up on it for like an album cover or some kind of promotional.
That'd be great.
I know, because I mean, it's very futuristic. I mean, you could talk about, all this stuff that's, where technology is taking us for better or worse. But she's almost like an acrobat, really. I mean, right? She's just
Right.
floating down into space somewhere.
Right.
And it's really, it's got a nice metallic feel to it, it's kind of
Yeah.
rusty, and it definitely would be something that would appeal to sci-fi, futurism. Well, let's go to the work that musically I think is such a fantastic album. It struck me at the right time. I really consider this to be one of Sal Baglio's masterpieces, and I've probably made him blush more than a few times, but I really think this album is phenomenal. And it struck me at the right time when I happened to be in the right mood in the middle of a pandemic, where I wasn't necessarily down on life or anything. It just hit me, and I started listening to it over and over again. And the way the album was crafted, the interludes with the solo guitars that touched upon everything from classical to country and it was a very economical piece of work, and it just had a great unity from beginning to end. And the sound engineer, the final piece, which was just a superb, piece of progressive music, which is kind of out of his wheelhouse. It was just stupendous, and it just struck me in such a great way. It's just a really great piece of work, and more people should be exposed to it. And I reviewed it for EastBoston.com, and Sal expressed his gratitude. But I followed his work since I was in college, and he's a typical, not a typical, he's a superb rock and roller, and he really pays homage to the many influences, both within the ensemble and as a solo artist. And he's just a very talented, one of the most talented people to come out of Eastie, no doubt about that. So I'm sure the album struck you in a particular way, and what struck you, what inspired you for this design?
Well, Sal definitely has the light. He has it. He has the rock and roll soul. This one, more than the others I've done for him.
Yeah, you've done a couple of them. We should know.
Right, but this one I took a different approach. The other pieces I've done for him, they're more or less scenes. One thing, one note in a way. But this, especially music for abandoned amusement parks 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Really struck me.
Yeah.
I really wanted that multi-layered textural approach to it. It's not totally dark, but it's just about dark.
Right. Well, actually, it starts off very cheery.
Right.
And then it takes that turn.
Right.
I mean, I wrote my review that it reminded me of a David Lynch film.
Yes.
From time to time, and
absolutely.
And it's just a great work, and there's still some really good straight ahead rock and roll in there.
Oh yeah.
And but the freak song, the elegy at the end was absolutely one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. Just, voice and guitar. It was just well done. But, part of this is that we all grew up, you grew up in East Boston, Sal grew up in East Boston. And we had these kind of like carnivals that would come to town
Yeah,
for, the
yeah,
parish, at the parish, and,
right,
usually sometimes, and then you would have Revere Beach, and then we, going to Nantasket Beach was a big thing in the summer for us, going out to Hull. And up by where I live currently in Wakefield, people rhapsodize about Pleasure Island, which I never
ah, yes,
really attended, but it did comprise a big part of young people's lives when going to either the carnival or the amusement park. The carnival would come to you, but you would go to the amusement park. You take the blue line out to Revere Beach and play pinball and just check out all the games. And if you're brave enough, you go on the roller coaster. But I
right,
mean, I'm sure some of that was going on in your head too.
right. I mean, actually, I was thinking about really too was, I remember, being brave enough to go on, the Ferris wheel, and it was down in Central Square, down where the
Yeah,
old Woolworths was. They had in Liberty Market, they had a carnival right there,
yeah.
and I braved the Ferris wheel at that carnival. But yeah, it reminded me of that. It also reminded me, one of my favorite writers is Ray Bradbury.
Uh-huh.
Kind of remind me of something wicked this way comes too a little bit, if you know that story, or even seen the movie. There's a movie of it, of that book. Yeah, yeah, the Dark Carnival thing.
Right. Oh, okay. So, I mean, you got the carousel in here, and I forgot about um, the other ride that he refers to in the story, but I mean, there's enough color in the work. It's very appropriate.
I didn't want to render anything.
Yeah,
I wanted the shapes to be there, but just as shapes. And the Ferris, even the merry-go-round has this blur to it, and
yeah,
and that's why I went to play around with the blurs, the textures, the gritty textures, and just shapes. I really didn't want it to be a scene. I wanted it to be more emotive.
yeah. And the final notes of this album is like, after all the barrage of chaos and apocalypse, there was just, you hear the sound of a mellotron from the carousel, and that would finish it off. So it's, really well done.
It's like a concept album.
It is. It definitely, that's what struck me. And that was, I don't know how many he's done for concept, but this was like his first, to me anyway, his first concept album.
Yeah.
But I think some of those songs, you could just imagine yourself back in the early 70s, listening to it on your AM radio driving around.
Yeah, it
And
has so many, layers to it. I mean, it's it feels like it could be a movie soundtrack too.
yeah, it could be. Let's talk about the award you're going to receive
Oh, right.
as we come to a close. Let's talk about the award that you're going to receive in early April. What is it that struck the people who are organizing this contest about your work?
Well, they just thought it was fabulous work. I mean, I just entered it. I almost didn't enter it. I filled out the forms halfway, and I thought, well, maybe maybe my graphic design background is, maybe as I'm overly, qualified to, but to enter this. But no, I mean, it was for people who are doing illustration that are not commissioned to do illustration,
Yeah,
and it's pretty much me. I'm doing this work anyway. I'm doing it's personal pieces. I'm going to do it, whether everybody buys it or not. But so that is what I think they were impressed with. They like the quality. The contest has been around for 30 plus years, and the real reason for it is to promote the next generation, to foster the next generation of writers and illustrators.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's chiefly why they're there. They give awards, but it's not just an award show. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. There's a week full of workshops we go through while we're
Mhm.
there.
Well, I'm glad somebody's still promoting, literature bound in physical form,
Right.
namely
Well,
the
we
book,
don't.
because I'm very much old school. And I see it in my students is that everything is so digitized. I think I'm going to have a kind of a breakdown when newspapers go away and the Wall Street Journal isn't delivered to my house every day.
Right.
But that's, we're kind of a part of that same generation because there's a contemplative part of reading that's gone away, and everything is so pixelated now. Does that cause you any concern, or is it something that you just adapt to?
You have to adapt to it.
Okay.
You do. But it is intrusive.
Yeah.
When I'm painting, I go into a zone, and I really don't want to be bothered by email or
Right.
sound coming on my computer and alerts and so that's what I mean. It's intrusive. But you kind of have to work that way these days.
Yeah. That's it. It's how artists survive, is that they adapt fairly well. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about yourself as we close out this edition of UpFront? It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm glad you took me up on the invitation. I learned a little bit, and I'm glad to have met you, and I hope to meet you in person sometime soon. But tell us what you have planned for the future.
Well, I mean, I will continue to work. I mean, I always have pieces going. I'm always putting out something. And yeah, that is it. I mean, the future is now. Every day I get up and I work on my work, and that's it. That's really where I want to be. Is focusing on my work, and I mean, I do commission work, and you have to get paid.
Right.
But yeah, it's and I mean, it's simple. That's what I do, and promote myself and try to do more work.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, and I will definitely try to be in the loop and keep track of all your new work. Please send it along. And let us know what you're doing going forward, and how we could get your word out about your recent work. I'm here to help.
Okay, well, my website is jimzaccariaart.com.
Okay.
That's from my website, from my art website, but it also has a link to my book cover design website. So I keep them separate. But there's links on each website to the other.
All right. Well, Jim, thanks a million, and we'll hear from you soon. Have a great day, and good luck in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank. Bye-bye.